All righty. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to, I guess, what we're calling practitioner conversations, mini podcasts, whatever you'd like to call it. This is the first episode. I guess it's an episode of this series. And today I will be having a conversation with my KPI certification learning pod coach, most importantly, and also a highly skilled OD consultant, facilitator, space creator, and all those great things, Mel Ampthor. Mel, why don't you give a little bit of background about yourself?
Sure. Thank you for those complimentary terms. I felt just a slight blush there, so that's lovely. My background is a long career with the federal service where I found my way into the area of leadership development, primarily facilitation, coaching, OD. I'm a learning junkie, which got me to the Georgetown coaching program. I won't date myself and date that, but it was several cohorts ago, and subsequently took the OD cohort, which we fondly refer to it, organizational change and change leadership, and then had the massive privilege and opportunity to, just as I retired from full-time work, ironically, to step into the Understanding Paradox and Polarities cohort with Brian and Kelly. And at that time, the principles of andiron, as we know them, at that time, the KPI was just being developed. So I continue to coach part-time. I relocated from the Northern Virginia area to Central Pennsylvania, which I love. And living in a college town has many, many benefits. And I'm still working just because I want to. And that really creates a different space for me, I think, to meet my clients in. It just feels more leisurely and rich, if you will, in the conversations that I am allowing myself to have.
Absolutely. And that's great to hear.
Yeah.
So based on what you just said a little bit about your background, I mean, what was the reasoning behind you wanting to get certified in the key polarity indicator, or we'll just shorten it, the KPI?
Yeah, sure. So the KPI, fascinated, very, very curious about what was being instructed in that cohort program. And of course, those programs are so wonderful because you're paired with such bright people in a small, intimate setting. And what really struck me was to sign up for that, back it up a step to learn more about the KPI and then to get certified in that. I went through a session with Brian Emerson and Kelly Lewis where they introduced the notion of polarities and the embodied process. And I have to say, it's one of those things like, once you see something, you can't unsee it. Once you experience that embodied process, for most people, I would say you can't undo that. And I literally said, I have to have more of this. And so I signed up. And then as soon as we could get certified on the tool, which was fascinating, I signed up as soon as I could. The reasons for that really, Cole, as corny as it sounds, there's two reasons, personal and professional. To be the best professional I could be. More so, what struck me in that embodied experience was, learning about myself. And so when we talk about, as coaches, self as instrument, or if we're doing any transformational work at any level of the system with an individual, a team, an organization, a community, I really wanted to make sure that I was in balance with those key polarities that really, really can show up and trip us up. And that then allowed me in turn, because I do believe it's highly related, to be able to show up as the best coach, consultant, friend, quite honestly, mother for my children, to be able to see the polarities, which we know is the key piece, and to understand and really welcome the benefits of that both end mindset. So that's really what was behind it. And honestly, trying to keep myself well versed in tools that are available to help the leaders that I'm working with be their best selves as well.
Absolutely. That's a powerful answer. I think what stuck out to me, and it'll feed into the next question a little bit, is like what it's done for the people you work with, but also the people close to you, family, and yourself, obviously, too, is just like so powerful. So when you think about the impact, I mean, you can pick whatever order you'd like when answering this, or whatever you're comfortable sharing, but like, what is what are those impacts at a deeper level of, like, from the client perspective, from the personal perspective, and then any other perspectives you'd like to share?
Well, from a personal perspective, because I think all things come from that, as how it is that I show up with my clients, with my kids, with my neighbors. There's not a napkin that I'm not happy to draw a model on, to include the navigator map that we use once we've identified these polarities, which the KPI just boom, just pulls them out so beautifully. And I know we'll have time to talk about the instrument. What really lands for me is that I can see where I was preferencing and othering, to use the language that we know from our studies, and from Brian's work in Suffering Paradox, that when we go there, we're not our best selves. So if I'm not my best self, how can I help my clients and others be their best self? And so that was really powerful. And the two, and I don't mind sharing with you, and that really stood out for me, are self and other, and then exude warmth and exude competence. And so those are two from two different models of the KPI, the human KPI and the leadership KPI, of course. And I really found, and kind of used the word with Brian and Kelly, that there was a real mashup between those two for me, that my exude warmth went to serving others and not so much serving myself. And so getting both of those in balance, as crazy as it sounds, allowed me to see my existence, my 24/7, entirely different. And there's no question that being in a semi-retired space helped me see that as well. But there was a gnawing there, and there was some angst there that I couldn't see for myself, and the tool illuminated it. So it's had that impact on me, and getting me out of an either or. Do I want to work or do I want to retire? Do both, right? So what's the third way there? What's the beautiful third way there? What's vulnerable about that? What's difficult about that? What do I want to step into? So for myself, getting out of that either or mentality and really welcoming the distinctions between, is this a problem or a decision to solve, or is this a polarity for me to manage? I mean, that to me is not problematic. Well, not to use the word problem, but it's not a challenge. It's exciting. And I wanted to create that same sense for my clients, if you will, that they don't need to see these two poles and the tension between, that we know and as coaches love, because there's work there, right? And there's a window into what the client is working on. So introducing that both and helping them understand, first of all, it's almost like letting themselves off the hook, that this is not a problem to solve, it's a polarity to manage. And when we do that, as we know, with all the utilizing all the tools that Andiron brings to us, we are so better able to help them see what they need to see, and to step into a transformative change, rather than what would be the distinction, a technical change where they just sort of putting band-aids on problems, or what they perceive were problems, that they're transforming themselves, thereby transforming their teams and organizations, hopefully. Sounds lofty, and we both know that it's true, and we both know that it's possible because we've seen it work. That's what I really love about it. So it's that perspective taking, helping them to make things, which the tool really does help them see things as object, rather than having them blind to the possibilities. And that to me is such a beautiful thing, to take those blinders off and have them look through a different lens and see what's possible.
Yeah, and that's so powerful. And it's like, when I feel like when people feel like they have to shift from point A to point B, it can seem very daunting. Whereas, the KPI and the polarities, it's like, you're not shifting one to the other. It's how do we maximize the benefits of both, which is what you taught me.
Well, thank you. Nice plug there, by the way. And it's so interesting when you said that point A to point B. Most of the coaching community is fully aware of John O'Donoghue's work. And he had a lovely podcast on the On Being show with Krista Tippett. And one of the comments, I just got a whole chill here, as you know I'm apt to do when things really land for me and are meaningful. Um, he said so many people are just stepping out their door, metaphorically or realistically, and going from point A to point B and not recognizing they treat the space in between as sort of this dead space. We're so inclined. So for me, that's the doing. And if we notice what happens in our shift from A to B, that's the being, and that's that transformative moment. So thank you for finding an easy way for me to throw John O'Donohue into the conversation. And I think that's such a powerful part of transformation. And I think the notion of polarities, the two poles and the tension and the tug of war between, and the sort of fluid scale, if you will, between that A and B, whatever they might be, because it's context, right? It's contextual. It depends, is oftentimes what we hear from our clients and from our students. And to be able to look at that wholeheartedly with the opportunity to say, I'm not solving, I'm thinking about what's possible and what might be possible. And then the hard work, as we know, where we literally and figuratively push up our sleeves, is getting to talk about what would that third way mean for us. And then what's hard when we, that motion is going down to the bottom part of the navigator when we look at that. And I think that the idea and the ideal of understanding polarities and having multiple perspectives and holding them, not always liking them, holding them and moving ourselves into that space in a really compassionate way so that we can literally have equanimity about both poles. I mean, what a beautiful thing that would be, right? And I think the tool allows us to open up those conversations. And it is like that thing that I said earlier, like, man, once you see these, Cole, you can't not see them. We ought not see them where they aren't. And when we do see them, ask the question, how might I attend to this? I might be working with one of my young adult children right now on some really significant polarities about career choices and this and that. And I've just found it to be really, really powerful in every aspect of my life.
I have found it's so interesting you say that because what I have found when I talk to, I mean, I don't know how old is your
24 and 25 are their ages.
perfect. So I have found that, I'm 24. I'm going to be 25 in March. And I have found that really with people in my generation, like
Mm.
the light bulb can be super impactful. And it's kids 24, I call them kids, but young adults really do experience these things at a really high level and they don't know. And one of the big things for me is like raising the awareness of that. I've been fortunate enough to be able to have exposure to this early enough on. Um, and it's always funny when I have friends ask me what I do for a living, because then we start talking about what polarities are causing them suffering, pain, and stress. And it's like, oh, I can actually help you with this. This is what I do. So that's
Yeah, that's beautiful. And you're right. It they appear at all ages. And so depending upon when we notice it, when we see it, and that determines sort of the entry level, how much we step in. Not that age has all to do with that, not chronological age, right? In terms of that. And you'll appreciate this. The applications of this are so broad. You as an athlete, Cole is a collegiate athlete, was a collegiate athlete. And I just spoke with a coach of one of the athletic teams here yesterday about doing a session on understanding that distinction between being an individual contributor and part of a team.
mm,
And that, they struggle with that because they're out for themselves. They want what is best for themselves, both academically and performance wise in their, I won't name the sport, in their respective sports, and they're part of a team. And so if we can identify the benefits in a third way for these young athletes, who knows what difference it may make. And it's a great wintertime thing to do for a team that typically is outside, and in central Pennsylvania that doesn't always work. So
absolutely. That is
again,
that is a fascinating polarity that definitely shows up on collegiate sports teams. I can tell you that firsthand. That
there you go.
individual collective is, I mean, especially when you start to get into the dynamics of, the way a depth chart works and the way, playing time obviously isn't equal for everyone. And so that is that definitely has a hold on a lot
Yeah.
of athletic sports.
And so I hope it opens something up for them that then, as we know, as practitioners of this great work, that it can expand sideways across other areas in our lives as well. So hopefully it'll be a good session. I'll let you know how it goes.
Please do. I would
I
love that.
will. Yeah.
And so one of my last couple of questions here, Mel, your experience is unique in that you've been able to use the KPI in your work as an individual coach consultant, but you've also had a pretty steady hand in the actual certification process, as I've alluded to earlier in this conversation, that you were a part of my certification learning journey. And I obviously can't give you enough roses for how great you were as a part of
Uh,
that. Um, can you talk a little bit about that, your involvement in the certification process, some of the things you've seen, some of your learnings, findings, things like that?
yeah. Well, it's that whole preaching to the choir sort of thing, in that coaches are curious about polarity, so they come to the certification program. Some are surprised by what they find. Most are, I would say, just really enamored with the tool. What's been really interesting is this dynamic of, and we see this too with the debriefs that we do for the Georgetown students, and that they're this is not simply a tool to use with your clients. What we're doing in certification and in those debriefs is saying, how are your own polarities getting into the system? I won't say getting in the way or helping. It could be helping, it could be holding you back. How are they influencing you as self as instrument? So the individual at any particular level trying to create a change advertently or inadvertently, right? And that's been really, really powerful to make that huge connection. It's one thing for me to get certified in a tool and go apply it. And I don't know, other than through explaining aspects, and I won't use other tools as an example, but simply to say there are aspects of tools that if I've gone through those assessments that bring me to some conclusions. And so if I can share that, and by having this, because coaching is such a powerful tool, and facilitation can be such a powerful tool at any level of the system, that the more they know about themselves, so self-awareness increases and enhances other awareness. So that has been really one of the most interesting things, is to see how, I'm with the students in your instance, and in the most recent learning pod that I worked with 5 times, 5 sessions, and the amount of conversation about how they're seeing it in themselves at the same time that they're seeing it with their, so to speak, practice clients and their learning partners, is really, really powerful. And what's wonderful is, and we know this about just human behaviors and assessments in general, these are not so scripted and hardly defined. Action, reflection, self, other, stability, change, exude confidence, exude warmth. They can show up differently for each and every person. And in fact, they do. And so it opens up a wealth of opportunities to look through the lens of, particularly with the KPI tool, the 3 different levels of the model, if you will, the outer ring, the middle ring, and then the inner ring with the actual polarities, and then to get to those discrete behaviors. So it's been absolutely fascinating. I will say without a doubt, it happened in your pod and then in this most recent pod. I think I may be learning more than they are, simply by soaking in all of the wisdom and the conversations from their experiences. And to be honest, that's what makes us better coaches. It makes us better practitioners, to open up and take on board different perspectives ourselves. So it's been really, really fascinating. And I think, if I have to say, the big jump for folks, 2 things. One, again, remembering that it's not our story, it's the client's story, and how they're experiencing the polarities, and understanding our own story and our experience with those polarities allows us to hear that, right, from our clients. And the other piece is that I think it allows them to hopefully help their clients, and we talk about this all the time, make that object subject shift so that they can see something objectively based on the feedback from the instrument or the indicator, rather than just sort of guessing. when we work with people in that very vulnerable way,
Mm,
particularly as a preference or an attachment to one pole or another applies to their own individual identity, I think, wow, that is the most humble work that we can do and have a privilege to do, to work with others in those vulnerable spaces so that they can see themselves in two ways, Cole, how others might be experiencing them. We can't know for sure. The instrument helps us to illuminate those possibilities. They're not for sure. And to get some context around that. And more importantly, to say how would it opens up each and every conversation. How would you like your colleagues, your team, your organization, your friends and family to be experiencing you and then working towards that story and making it a reality? I think that helps right size when we find a client on one pole or another. That
mm.
conversation about what they want and what they want to experience is really, really powerful. And it's in that vulnerability, right? Which again, I cannot say enough that this tool really helps us to step into that and to experience such that it's such an invitation, a privileged invitation to go there with our clients. And every coach wants to go there, I believe, and at some level of, compassion and care.
Yeah, and I think just to add on to that is it's gentle too. It's not like it's, and I say that in terms of like it's inviting into that vulnerability, whereas
Yeah.
there's that daunting again, right? It's like a massive change can seem very daunting, but the way it lays out is it's not here to here. It's maximizing benefits of both. So
Yeah.
yeah, I appreciate
For that ideal of success, right? Who doesn't want to go to, no, I'm not interested, right? I've never had a client say
you.
that. I don't want to be more successful. And I love your phrasing of the gentle because you can use it very gently. I've had one client where I almost needed to use it as a 2x4 to the head. And and I was resistant to do so. And I've shared this story with Amy Levine and indirectly. And what that has come to is creating an openness and an awareness for this client to invite me into other vulnerable conversations around their coaching abilities, practice, most of all to do with how they're seen and how they don't want to be seen. So again, opening up to what's possible and what's your role in that and what would you like and how might we get there, but not until we've identified that third way, the risks, the vulnerabilities, and that really delicious space of that where we can take a client for the sake of themselves and their organizations. And that to me is the power of this. I mean, perhaps it's the power of coaching, and this is just a fabulous tool to enable coaches, facilitators, consultants to be able to see what their clients are not readily seeing. They think it's like the magic 8 ball, right? You might
That's
be
a
too
good
young for
analogy.
that reference. And
Oh, I know Magic 8 Ball.
yeah, I mean, more of the heads up game right on your phone. And
No,
when
just
we can see things that they can't see, I just think that creates such a connection and builds a bridge to that vulnerability, to help them see it, right, in a very gentle way, but for this one individual with a 2x4 to their head.
that is too funny.
Metaphorically speaking, of course.
Of course, of course,
Of
of course,
course.
of course, of course.
It was on Zoom. Yeah.
Of course. Well, I mean, with that, I mean, what better way to close than that? That is a powerful, powerful statement in a very, very powerful conversation, Mel.
Well, I've enjoyed it, Cole. As you know, I love this work, and I love partnering with Andiron on all things polarities and just learning and collegial connection in general. A great organization, and to hold that both and mindset. As a matter of fact, I just saw, I'll tell you this last story. A friend of mine sent me a newsletter introducing a book that this individual was writing. And I think the title's wrong because it takes the reader, and I don't want to disclose it, right? It takes the reader to an either or sort of
Mhm.
understanding of the title, which I think minimizes the author because it's about their story. And so I have to find a gentle way to work into that conversation. It's supposed to come out in May, so I suspect they may not want to change the title yet, but at this point. But anyway, uh, again, that idea, that all that to say, once you start seeing them, it's really powerful. So I'm so grateful for Brian and Kelly's work and all the work before them, obviously, in the world of polarities and paradox, and enjoyed this conversation very much. So thank you for inviting me on board.
Absolutely, Mel. I mean, you were one of the first and earliest supporters, and you've been so supportive ever since, and obviously mean a ton to me as well. So I appreciate you joining me, and yeah, thank you so much for this great conversation.
You betcha.
Alrighty, Mel. Thank you so much.
Okay.